Today's guest is Terry Tucker. He is a motivational speaker and author and international podcast guest on topics of motivation, mindset, and self-development, and for the past 10 years, a cancer warrior. So welcome, Terry.
Well, Shelley, thanks for having me on. I'm really looking forward to talking with you today.
Thank you. So let's go back. Tell us where, I know you've moved around a lot and things like that. So how has that played a role in your life?
Yeah, I've moved around quite a bit. I was born and raised on the south side of Chicago, but have lived in Atlanta, Georgia, Santa Barbara, California, went to college in South Carolina. I am bi-coastal, and if you consider Houston, I'm even on that coast. So it's helped me because I've got an opportunity to meet people from different parts of the country. And I think that's incredibly important. A lot of people, sort of stay where they're born, get a job, live their life, and then die there. But I got to, hang out in the South. I got to hang out in California. I got to hang out in Texas and things like that. So I've really been fortunate to have that. And that was, my dad, it sounds like my dad was in the Army, but he worked for McDonald's, the hamburger chain. And so they moved him around a lot. And then once my wife and I got married, I'm kind of the trailing spouse. So she makes the money, I go where she goes. So it's been a blast. I feel very fortunate to have lived all over the United States.
That's awesome. Yeah, my family had the opportunity. We traveled for a year around the United States, and it is amazing just the different cultures, even within the United States, and to learn from other people. It's fun.
It is.
So what, it took you to, so one of your jobs, you said you're on SWAT team and help with hostage negotiation. So how was that?
Yeah, so I started out my law enforcement career in Santa Barbara. I became a reserve police officer when we lived out there, and really kind of had the bug. It really bit me. And I was like, when our family moved to Cincinnati, Ohio, I told my wife, I'm like, look, I want to do this full time. And she had married me when I was sort of an 8 to 5 Monday through Friday hospital administrator. And, now I'm like, hey, I'd like to work nights and, miss anniversaries and birthdays and all that kind of fun stuff that police do. But she was incredibly supportive in that. And I've spent my life wanting to be part of the best of whatever I was doing, whatever company I was with. And usually SWAT are the best officers. They get the best training and the best equipment. So when there was an opening as a negotiator, I put in for it. And so, I had to do all the physical fitness, meet with the psychologist, take all these tests and all that kind of stuff, and eventually got on the team, and then realized just how little I knew about negotiating. Because if you think about what a police officer does, 99% of what we do is face-to-face with another human being. So, if I stop you to give you a ticket for speeding, or I answer a radio run for a fight, that's all face-to-face. But as negotiators, we were not with the person we were negotiating with. We could be blocks away talking on the phone, or, on the other side of a locked door or something like that. And one thing we learned in negotiations was this formula. It was 7-38-55. So it basically says, if you're trying to get a message across, 7% of delivering that message is the words you use. 38% of it is your tone of voice, and 55% of it is your body language or facial expressions. So as negotiators, we didn't have that 55%. We were, if I said something, I didn't know if the person, got a look, like, oh gosh, what an idiot he is, or something like that. I didn't know that. So we had to figure things out based on what people were saying, what they weren't saying, and how they were saying. So there was a lot of nuance in being a hostage negotiator.
Wow. And that sounds like a skill everyone should have, right? For whatever.
I think you should, but again, we take so much from the visual. We take so much when you and I are having a conversation from how you react. Are you tensing up, or are you open to what I'm saying and things like that? Mm-hmm. And we take those cues, those clues from our visual aspect, not so much what we're hearing or what we're saying. And so it's important, if you can learn those skills. But the nice thing is we did this as a team. So you could be negotiating with somebody, and you had another negotiator sitting right next to you that was listening, had headphones on, and would give you notes. And then we had 3 or 4 more people kind of work in the crowd. Why are we here? What happened? What precipitated this and that kind of thing? So you might get a note that says, don't talk about his mother, because what precipitated this was he had a big fight with his mother, and, he barricaded himself with a gun in his house or something like that. So it was more of a team thing than, you just being out there and kind of flying by the seat of your pants. But a lot of times that was the case. We didn't know why we were there. And so we would go down a rabbit hole. And if we were wrong, the person would yell at us and say, no, you're an idiot. That's not what I'm talking about. Or if we were on the right track, then it was like, oh yeah, somebody gets me. And now you're starting to develop that trust that everybody likes. That's the only way you're going to get anywhere with anybody, is if they trust you.
Yeah. Well, one of your jobs that you said, you're a motivational speaker. So you currently are a motivational speaker. So what has brought that to play?
Yeah, I made the brilliant business decision to start a motivational speaking business right as COVID hit. And so everything shut down. Nobody was doing anything in person. Nobody was even doing anything online. And so somebody had reached out to me and said, well, would you like to be a guest on my podcast? And this was honestly my response. What's a podcast? I had absolutely no idea what a podcast was. And so I thought, well, like so many other companies or organizations, when COVID hit, you had to figure out a different way of delivering your business. You had to figure out a different way of doing things. And so I'm like, well, yeah, sure. I'd like to do that. And I remember when I first started, I had Post-it notes all around my camera, and they would ask me a question and I would get the answer to that. And I would read the Post-it. I was terrible. I was horrible at podcasting when I started, but it was an avenue to try to get my message out. And my message is really what I've learned, certainly over my life, but what I've learned really during these last 10, almost 11 years now of having cancer. And so that's what I talk about, not in a negative way, not in, oh, woe is me kind of thing, but more of, here are things that I've learned that maybe you can apply in your life, whether you have cancer or not, that I think would be beneficial. And so that was my way. And I've been doing that ever since. Things are starting to open up, since COVID has kind of quieted down a little bit. But for the most part, I spend most of my time trying to get my message out through this medium of podcasting.
That's awesome. So can you tell us and take us down the journey of, where the cancer, when you discovered it, and that bit of your journey?
Sure. So yeah, 11 years worth of this. 2012, I was a girls' high school basketball coach in Texas, and I had a callus break open on the bottom of my foot, right below my third toe. And initially didn't think much of it, because as a coach, you're on your feet a lot. But after a couple of weeks of it not healing, I went to see a podiatrist, a foot doctor friend of mine, and he took an x-ray and he said, Terry, I think you have a cyst in there and I can cut it out. And he did. And he showed it to me, just a little gelatin sac, some white fat in it, no dark spots, no blood, nothing that gave either one of us concern. But fortunately or unfortunately, he sent it off to pathology to have it looked at. And then 2 weeks later, I get that call that we all dread in our lives. And he said, he was having a difficult time explaining to me what was going on. And the more difficulty he was having, the more frightened I was becoming, until finally he just laid it out for me. He said, Terry, I've been a doctor for 25 years. I have never seen this form of cancer. You have an incredibly rare form of melanoma, which most of us think as, too much exposure to the sun and you get a dark spot on your skin somewhere. This has nothing to do with that, but this is a form of melanoma that appears on the bottom of the feet or the palms of the hands. And because it was so uncommon, he recommended I go to MD Anderson Cancer Center in Houston and be treated. And so I did. I had surgery to remove the tumor on my foot. I had all the lymph nodes in my groin taken out, and then I had a skin graft to close the wound. And at the time, melanoma was the death sentence. My oncologist said, you're more than likely not going to live 5 more years. But I'm going to put you on this drug called interferon to help keep the disease from coming back. It's not a melanoma treatment. It's not a chemo, but the side effects of that were that I had severe flu-like symptoms for 2 to 3 days every week after each injection. Wow. And I took those weekly injections for 5 years. So imagine having the flu every week for 5 years. Yeah. And as I said, that was not a cure. That was just my doctor said, we're trying to kick the can down the road to buy you more time. 5 years of interferon became so toxic to my body that I ended up in the intensive care unit with a fever of 108 degrees, which is usually not compatible with being alive.
Right.
Somehow I survived that. So I had to stop it. And almost immediately, the cancer came back in the exact same spot on my foot where it presented 5 years earlier. That necessitated the amputation of my left foot in 2018. Cancer worked its way up my leg, 2019, 2 more surgeries. And then in 2020, right in the middle of the COVID pandemic, an undiagnosed tumor kind of in my ankle area grew large enough that it fractured my tibia, my shin bone. And my only recourse at that time was to have my left leg amputated above the knee. And I found out I had tumors in my lungs. And Shelley, I know that sounds like a very dark and ugly journey, and it certainly has been. But I'll tell you 2 things that I've learned from this. Number one, I don't think you really know yourself until you've been tested by some form of adversity in your life. And secondly, I think cancer has made me a better human being.
Wow, that's incredible. Yeah, what an incredible journey that's been for you. And it's not over, right?
No, I'm still being treated for the tumors in my lungs.
Yeah. So I can, as you began to share that story, I could hear that emotion of even that first diagnosis for you. It seemed like it, still there, and you're still dealing with it. So you say, you've overcome this like mentally, right? So you're now this motivational speaker and you have such energy about you. So is that what formed this will to overcome through this cancer that you want to share?
I think so. I remember when I graduated from college, I spent 3.5 years living with my parents because my father and my grandmother were both dying of different forms of cancer. So I needed to help my mom with that. And my dad had end-stage breast cancer back in the 1980s, which in a man was pretty rare. They really didn't know how to treat it. And they told him to go home and die. Well, he lived another 3.5 years. And the reason he did, I believe, is because he had a purpose. I mentioned he worked for McDonald's, but he was in real estate. And he worked up till 2 weeks before he died. And I just kind of remembered that and sort of filed it away in the back of my mind, knowing that, when my turn came, that I needed to have a purpose. I needed to have something that was bigger than me. And so when I got cancer, it was like, well, I think I went through all the stages of grief that we think of. First it was denial, then it was I got mad, and then it was bargaining with God. Our daughter was in high school, just let me live long enough to see her graduate from high school. And then I got down, and then I just got to a point where, this sucks, but I'm going to have to embrace the suck, so to speak. I don't like these cards, but these are the cards I've been dealt. I'm going to have to play them to the best of my ability. And so doing things like this, being a guest on your podcast, it energizes me. It gives me a purpose. And that purpose gives me that energy to not just say, oh, let me tell you my story. It's really terrible. Yeah, it's bad. Winston Churchill, the Prime Minister of Great Britain, used to say, if you're going through hell, keep going. And so that's kind of the way I look at it. I'm going through hell, but I need to keep going. And for some reason, I am still here. My doctor showed me my CAT scan from back when I found out I had tumors in my lungs and I had my leg amputated. And I don't have any medical background. I don't know, what a CAT scan should or shouldn't look like. But I kind of was like, well, that doesn't look like it should be there. I had these big tumors in my lungs. I had fluid all around the pleural spaces in my lungs. And I remember looking at my oncologist and saying, how was I alive? And he kind of smiled and shook his head. And he was like, I don't know, because you shouldn't have been. Wow. Which said to me that, God wasn't done with me yet. When I die, where I die, how I die, way above my pay grade. So don't spend a lot of time worrying about it. Spend more time just trying to live the life that I think I'm supposed to live. That's
incredible. Yeah, my dad actually passed away from melanoma cancer, and the more typical of, being in the sun too much.
Yeah.
And my brothers, I have 5 brothers, and they get checked regularly, and they have them all the time that they need to get burned off. And it changes your whole life of just this doom and gloom maybe is there, right? But you're taking it to a different level. You've chosen this higher path of just being motivated by overcoming and what's my purpose, right? And I think you have a great purpose to just help others to have that motivation to just overcome and have that high mental state. And I think with being in that state probably helps you. I mean, it helps you physically as well as just mentally, correct?
I think so. I mean, my wife and I always kind of have I'll call it a discussion about, when I have treatment, I go to the hospital every 3 weeks for an entire week to be treated for the tumors in my lungs, which then gives me 2 weeks off. And, my wife is always like, you need to rest, you need to get your blood counts back up, you need to do all that kind of stuff. And my joke is always, I'll get plenty of rest when I'm dead. This energizes me. This gives me that purpose. This gives me something to do that isn't sitting around wondering, what's the next scan going to show, or what's the next blood test going to show. And, I mentioned, and I think this is one thing that I learned through, at least for me, it was team sports. I started playing basketball when I was 9, and I played all the way up until I was 21 when I graduated from college. And I think one thing that team sports taught me was the importance of being part of something that's bigger than yourself. You realize on a team that if you don't do your job, not only do you let yourself down, but you let your teammates down, your coaches down, your fans down, etc. And if you think about it, the biggest team game that we all play is this game of life. Yeah. And so I am on a clinical trial drug now that more than likely is not going to save my life. It has stabilized my tumors, but it hasn't gotten rid of them. And eventually they're probably going to start to grow again. And so to me, that's being part of something bigger yourself, to go for these treatments every day for every 3 weeks, to know that it's probably not going to save my life, but it might save the life of somebody 5 years from now or 10 years from now, based on the data that the doctors glean from my blood tests and my scans and things like that. And to me, it's worth doing that. It's worth going through that to know that, at least as far as I'm concerned, that's something that's bigger than me.
Wow, that's amazing. So how does God play a role for that in your life with that?
Yeah, I talk a lot about what I call my 3 Fs, which have, along with other things, have gotten me through this. And the 3 Fs are faith, family, and friends. And I've always had a very strong faith in God. I remember when I was about 14 years old, I had my first knee surgery as a result of a basketball injury. And this was long before arthroscopic surgery was available. You were in the hospital for like 5 days, all the things they don't do today. Mm-hmm. And I remember I was getting pain medication and I had a high fever. I had an infection in the wound. And I woke up at like 2 o'clock in the morning hallucinating. And, I'm a kid, and I'm scared to death. And, I pick up the phone, I call home, it's 2 o'clock in the morning, my mom answers, I tell her what's going on. And she's like, open your bedside table there. She said, I put a rosary in there. Get the rosary and start saying it. And that helped me, that calmed me down. That it was like, okay, now I'm going to say the rosary. And so faith has always been a big part of my life. And, I've seen so many people in life that started down a road toward a goal. And then they butt up against an impediment. Something gets in their way, and they can't get over it, around it, or through it. And so they quit, they give up. But we don't just give up. We want to blame somebody. We want to blame our parents or our boss or our station in life. Very few people take personal responsibility for their own success and happiness. So when people found out I got cancer, it was like, well, who do you blame? I'm like, well, what do you mean, who do I blame? It's like, well, do you blame your parents? And then when they find out I have a faith life, they're like, well, you must blame God. And I sort of joke with them. I'm like, no, I don't think God got up on a Tuesday morning, checked his to-do list and said, Terry Tucker cancer today. I don't think that happened at all.
Yeah.
But what I do think God has done is given me the resources to get through this. I mean, when I was on interferon, when I was, having the flu every week, I was so sick of being sick that I literally prayed to die. It was like, come on, God. I've always said there's a difference between living and not dying. Mm-hmm. And I felt I was in that not dying part of life where I really wasn't contributing. I was just sort of hanging on from, one day to the next. And so it was like, look, God, this isn't living. Just take me out of this. Well, obviously he didn't. But I think what he did was give me the strength to continue to go on. And I think he does that now. Like I said, should have been dead several times, but I guess he's not done with me. And I say a prayer every morning. I'm like, look, I got a couple podcasts today. Is this what you want me to do? Is this a direction you want me to go? And I mean, God's not talking to me. There's the old joke about, when we talk to God, it's called prayer. When God talks to us, it's called schizophrenia. So God's not talking to me, But I really think what God is doing is sort of directing me and showing me the way he wants me to live my life. And when that's done, then he can have me, and we'll take it from there.
That's awesome. Yeah, I think God does talk to us in different ways. I mean, there's, some people do hear his voice, but most of the time it's just you feel like this is the right thing to do and you just proceed forward. And I love how yeah, God's not going to just say, yeah, let's tweak this a little bit for this, give this person a little difficulty today. But I think he allows us to have those difficulties so we do grow. And like you, I mean, you're taking it to a high level of just, overcoming and growing from this instead of going the other direction. And I think that's what our tests in life are is what are we going to choose? Which direction are we going to take our life? And it's a test for us. And I think you're doing an amazing job with that, with this.
Well, thank you. I mean, don't get me wrong. I mean, there are certainly days where I feel, when I have a really bad reaction to my clinical trial drug, and I kind of feel like, it's like, where are you? Why did you abandon me? I mean, I'm having a hard time here. Help me out. And somebody commented, it's like, well, maybe kind of like gold. He's burning off the impurities with that, what you're having to go through to make you a better person. And I'd never thought about it that way, and it's like, well, maybe he is, but I still wish he'd be there, and I know he is, but you just feel, when you're mentally depleted and you're physically hurting and you're just emotional in that, and you're like, I'm a mess, and you just don't feel like he's there, but he is. And I know he is, but sometimes I kind of, and I don't know if this is right, but sometimes I chastise him. It's like, why are you here? I need help. I don't feel like you're here right now. Help me out. And I feel good that I got a relationship with him that's, where I can say, hey, I'm not feeling you right now. I need you.
Yeah.
Don't abandon me in that. And I think, I was raised as a Catholic, and, you're very reverent and all that kind of stuff. But like I said, I think God's got a sense of humor. I think God, I mean, he's God. I think he can take Terry Tucker saying, hey, I don't think you're here right now. I need a little more help. And, if he can't, then I think we're all in big trouble.
Yeah, I agree with you there. So can you tell us, I know you have 4 truths. Can you share what those are and tell us a little about those?
Sure. So the 4 truths, I call them my 4 truths. They're not mine. I don't own them. I don't think you can own a truth. I think a truth is universal. But these are things that I've learned over my life, but mostly I've learned during these last 11 years with cancer. And they're one sentence. I have them here on a Post-it note that I see in my office. So they get reinforced multiple times. So the first one is this: control your mind, or your mind is going to control you. The second one is embrace the pain and the difficulty that we all experience in life, and use that pain and difficulty to make you a stronger and more resilient individual. The third one I look at more as a kind of a legacy type of truth, and it's this: what you leave behind is what you weave in the hearts of other people. And then the fourth one I think is pretty self-explanatory: as long as you don't quit, you can never be defeated. And so I call those sort of the bedrock of my soul. They're just, I think, a good place to start to build a quality of life from. I mean, they're probably not complete. I'm sure, 1 or 2 may resonate with people. And I always say, if they do, then take them, incorporate them in your life, develop your own truths around them. These are just the things that seem to work for me so far.
I love those. And I think, just when you said what you leave behind is what you leave in the hearts of people, and just, how you leave, how do they feel when you've been around them? The feeling that you leave with them, it reminds me of that. And controlling our mind, I think says a lot from what you've explained with your history with your cancer, and just how you've taken control and made it positive and to help you overcome, even though you have those bad days. Everyone does, right? Yeah. But to look to God and say, what's the purpose in this, and find a purpose in every situation. So I love that.
Yeah. To learn, I've always felt it's important to be a lifelong learner, and not just, reading books and, educating yourself, but learning about life, learning about why you're here, learning about your purpose. Viktor Frankl, the concentration camp survivor and psychiatrist, used to get very adamant when, people were like, well, I don't know what my purpose is. And it would be like, well, you need to find that purpose. I mean, that's the reason you were put on the face of this earth. We all have, unique gifts and talents, we should use those gifts and talents as far as our purpose goes. And, people say, well, it's not my purpose, and, it's my passion. And I remember hearing a saying that said, don't follow your passion, but bring it with you everywhere you go. And I love that. It's like, be passionate about what you're involved in. And if you're not passionate, then it's probably not your purpose, so look for something else. Don't feel like you get locked in where, well, I got this job and I'm making money, but I'm miserable. Well, I'll just stay here. And so many people do that. So many people just acquiesce and be like, well, I give up. I'm good. It's comfortable. But the comfortable and the familiar is good for the brain. It's not good for growth. You got to step outside those comfort zones. And I'll end it with this. I'm reminded of the 4 types of people. There's an entrepreneur here in the US by the name of Ed Milet, and he talks about the 4 types of people in the world. He said the first type are the unmotivated. And he said that's the vast majority of people in life. He said the second group are the motivated. Pretty low level, if I do this, then I will get that. But it's low level, but it's high enough where people live a pretty good life just being motivated. And then the third group are the inspirational people. Inspiration coming from 2 words, in spirit. You move people with your energy. And then the last group he talks about are the aspirational people, where people want to be like you. And, when I talk, a lot of times I'll talk about that. And it's like, where are you? Where do you fall on that spectrum? Are you an inspirational person? Are you unmotivated? Where are you in that life? And where do you want to be? And if you're unmotivated, but you want to be aspirational, how are you going to get there? How are you going to change your life? How are you going to make a difference in other people's lives so that they want to be like you? But I love those. I mean, it's a very simple way of kind of looking at sort of what category we all fall in.
Yeah, good. Those are good things to just reflect. Yeah, where am I standing? What level do I want to get to, and how can I get there?
Yeah.
That's awesome. So you have a book. Can you tell us about your book?
Yeah, the book is called Sustainable Excellence, the 10 Principles to Leading Your Uncommon and Extraordinary Life. And it was really a book that was born out of 2 conversations I had. One was with a former player that I had coached in high school who had moved to Colorado, where my wife and I live, with her fiance. And the 4 of us had dinner one night. And I remember saying to her, I'm really excited that you're living close and I can watch you find and live your purpose. She got real quiet for a while. And then she looked at me and she said, well, Coach, what do you think my purpose is? I said, I have absolutely no idea what your purpose is, but that's what your life should be about. Finding the reason you were put on the face of this earth, using your unique gifts and talents, and living that reason. So that was one conversation. And then I had a young man in college reach out to me on social media, and he asked me what I thought were the most important things that he should learn, not to just be successful in his job or in business, but to be successful in life. And I didn't want to give him that, get up early, work hard, help others. I didn't want to give him that. Not that those aren't important. Those are incredibly important. But I wanted to see if I could go deeper with him. So I spent some time and I was writing some notes and, kind of had these 10 thoughts, these 10 ideas, these 10 principles. And so I sent them to him. And then I kind of stepped back and I was like, I got a life story that fits underneath that principle, or I know somebody whose life emulates this principle. So literally during the 3 to 4 month period where I was healing after I had my leg amputated, I sat down at the computer every day and I built stories, and they're real stories about real people underneath each of the principles. And that's how Sustainable Excellence came to be.
That's incredible. So I think that'd be a great thing for people to get a hold of and read. Is there anything else that you would like to share with our audience before we close today?
I guess if I can tell you 2 more quick stories, if I may, okay, that I think are important. I had a nurse ask me, these are both going to be nurse stories. All I got is basketball and nurse stories. So sorry, that's kind of my life. Fine. So I had a nurse ask me what it was like to have my foot amputated and then have my leg amputated. And I told her it has not been easy. I'm still learning how to walk with a prosthetic. I'm 6'8" tall, so falling is not an option. You get hurt from this height when you do that. But what I told her was, cancer can take all my physical faculties, but cancer can't touch my mind, it can't touch my heart, and it can't touch my soul. And that's who I am. That's who you are, Shelley. That's who everybody who's listening to us. That's who we really are. And I'm not telling you not to go to the gym. I'm not telling you not to eat right and do the things to take care of your body. You absolutely should. But I think we spend a whole lot of time worrying about, is my hair right? Or am I wearing the right clothes? Or, my biceps big enough or whatever. And we don't spend nearly as much time working on our heart, our mind, and our soul. And I think if I could offer a suggestion, is just spend a little more time on those three things and figure out who you are. Because I think if you do, you'll have a whole lot more peace in your life. So that's one story. And then the other story, another nurse story. This is about a younger nurse. She was about 25 when I met her. She was already a nurse, but she was learning how to do things on the unit where I get treated for my tumors. And about 8 months later, she was taking care of me. And she said, Terry, I've got a story I want to tell you, but I'm a little uncomfortable telling it to you. I really didn't know how to respond to that. I thought, well, it sounds like I might enjoy it. I hope you decide you want to tell me. And so she's in and out doing nursing stuff for the next couple of hours and finally comes in, sits down on the bed in the room. And she said, all right, here's the story. She said, when I first met you, I was going to get out of nursing. She said, I had a very good friend of mine die. I was in a really dark place. I talked to my mom and dad. I was going to quit nursing and I was going to go to work for Amazon. And she said, and then I met you and I see what you go through. I see how you, for lack of a better word, suffer through these treatments every 3 weeks and things like that. And then I went back into your file and I read your chart about all you've been through. And she said, when I was done, I knew I was where I was supposed to be. Now, if she would have never told me that story, I would have had no idea that my life had such a positive impact on her. And I know we're all struggling with different things, whether it's mental things, emotional things, physical things, whatever it is. And we think that nobody cares. But I guarantee you, there are people out there that are just amazed with the amount of courage that you are exhibiting and would give anything they have to have the courage that you have. So, don't think that for a minute that you're isolated, that you're by yourself, that nobody's watching you, that nobody cares, because they do. And John Wooden, the basketball coach at UCLA when I was growing up, had a saying that went like this: a careful person I want to be, a little person follows me. I dare not go astray for fear they may go the same way. So I love those two stories because I think they really talk about what's important in life. It's not about the things. It's not about what we can consume. It's about how we can open ourselves up and basically empty ourselves out for the betterment of the people around us.
That's beautiful. Thank you so much for sharing those. Yeah, sure. I think it is how you touch others, and it's not the things in life, it's who you're becoming and how you're sharing that with other people. So thank you so much for sharing your light and your inspiration and all that the light that you share is incredible. So, and to motivate other people to help them to overcome the obstacles in their way. So I appreciate you sharing all that you have today. Can you tell people where they can find you so that they can learn more from you?
Sure. So I have a blog called Motivational Check. Every day I put up a thought for the day. And with that thought usually comes a question about maybe how you could apply that thought in your life. I have recommendations for books to read, videos to watch. You can leave me a message there. So motivationalcheck.com will get you to me.
Great. Thank you. And can you explain where that Motivational Check name came from?
Sure. So that basically goes back to my time in the police academy in Cincinnati. Our defensive tactics instructor gave us that phrase, motivational check, because we did some pretty crazy things. We ran marathons. We would run to apartment buildings that had big fountains, and we do push-ups and sit-ups in the water and all that. This guy was kind of crazy, but again, you don't know yourself until you've been tested by some form of adversity. And this guy was basically testing us. And so he gave us this phrase, motivational check, that if you were having a bad day, if you just didn't think you could get through a particular drill or run, you could scream that out. You could yell that out, motivational check. And we were the 84th recruit class in the police academy. And the rest of us would respond with we would yell out 84, just to let the person know that, hey, you're not alone. We're all in this together. We're all having a tough day, but we will get through this as a group, as a team. So when I was looking for something to call my blog, motivational check just kept coming to the forefront of my brain. So I figured that's what I ought to call it.
That's awesome. I love that. And just like you said earlier, we're all in this together in life, right? Yeah. So we're here to motivate one another and help one another, and we're not alone. So thank you so much, Terry.
Well, Shelley, thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.